Welcome to the Learning Curve, powered by Two-Turn, the podcast for center owners who care as much about their spreadsheets as they do their students. I'm with the former managing director of Cialfo and the current creative director of 42 and Ferry, Justin Jobity.
Hey,
How are you?
good man. How are you?
Good. Nice
Yeah,
to see you.
good to see you again as well.
Please introduce yourself and what you've done.
Sure. So I, for the past 15 to 16 years, have been working in education management, specifically in admissions consulting. Uh, for those who are not kind of familiar with what admissions consulting is, we help really talented students apply to the top universities in the US and the UK. You're thinking Ivy League schools like Harvard or Penn or Princeton, and in the UK it would be like Oxford, Cambridge, and then the other top 10s. So my career has actually been in scaling and growing teams and companies that specifically focus on that as a service. I moved to Singapore when I was about 23. So this is like maybe 2011. And I joined a team of two young men who had an idea of introducing admissions consulting to the Southeast Asian Singaporean market, which at the time was very saturated with tuition, test prep, academic prep, after school tuition, stuff like that. Admissions consulting tended to be a very American kind of service provided that wasn't very, I don't know, wasn't well introduced into Asia at the time. So yeah, so my career has been kind of in scaling and building companies, not just in Singapore, but in Thailand and Vietnam, to kind of pursue that in different ways.
Cialfo is a pretty popular software platform now.
Yeah.
You started when it was like a brick and mortar building, right? I mean,
Literally two other guys in a room that's like not much bigger than this.
so please walk us through how it went from that to where it is now.
Sure. I think honestly I was hired because I had a degree from Northwestern University. These guys were quite young. They were fresh grads from the local universities in Singapore. Um, when I started my career doing admissions consulting, I had been working in education for about 2 years. I was an account manager at a private university in Singapore. And my job when they hired me was to work individually with students and families to help them kind of ideate their essays for top universities to help figure out their majors. A lot of Asian families were very unfamiliar with the process, which is something that I think a lot of American families take for granted. Like, as an American, we grew up very much knowing that we have to like score this on the SAT. Universities are looking for these type of profiles. But I think overseas, and especially in countries like Singapore, where the university system is already quite robust, they're not as familiar, especially at that time, with like what are U.S. universities looking for, what is a Common App essay, what are the UCSAs. There's a bit of a nuance that wasn't very well known in the culture at the time. So it was my job to kind of both help parents navigate that, and then also kind of because it's quite a heavy workload of essay writing, and it's a huge investment for families to make, right? To study overseas, it's quite expensive compared to just studying locally. So you're really kind of playing with big decisions, and obviously sending your child for 4 years overseas is also a psychological and personal investment as well. So it was my job to work with students and families to navigate that process, usually for about 9 months to a year. So yeah, that's what I had started doing in my first slash maybe second year of working at that company.
It's a really complicated process for people unfamiliar with it.
Mm.
How did you educate that type of market?
So I think you're in the beginning just doing it family by family. I think you're really teaching families about the entire process. And I think while, Singaporean kids are extremely smart, Singaporean families are very well versed in the difficulty of university applications. I think what becomes I think culturally difficult at that time was writing creative essays. The idea so Singaporean applications, much like the rest of the world, follow this kind of like British style of like basically your personal statement very much looks like a written out CV of your accomplishments and achievements. Whereas the American applications are much more personality focused. They're asking sometimes funny, quirky questions to kind of see how you'll answer them. How do you intelligently articulate who you are and your passions in a way that's creative? And I think that was not necessarily baked into a lot of the elementary, middle school, high school education system in Singapore at the time. So a lot of students were kind of uncomfortable writing about themselves in an existential way. Being challenged in a creative way, I think, was a very difficult thing for some students more than others. And then, especially if that's being asked by a top 10 university, parents who are often wanting to be a part of that kind of review are like, "Wait, you're writing about, like, growing blueberries, or you're writing about, like, whatever, something silly, that's showing something deeper about you, and there's this big metaphor and whatever." That can be a very, difficult pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of families at the time. So my job was kind of nuanced. It was very much teaching students, like, the very obvious and easy to learn playbook, while also kind of teaching creative writing. Yeah,
How do you scale something that's that personal
yeah.
and that nuanced to the level that it is now?
So I think the thing that I'm really happy and grateful for, having worked at Cialfo is that, I don't have an MBA. So I was there for about 5 years. I really spent the first 5 years with that company kind of getting a, like, hands-on MBA. And so after a certain while, we were getting more students than I could, service. So then we got new, admissions consultants, and then we had to build a sales team, then we had to build a marketing team, and then next thing you know, because I was the first employee there, because I was so operationally attached to how these things have been going on for the first 2 or 3 years especially, we started thinking about, like, how do we scale this? Like, we can't like, the thing that I loved about our CEO, Rohan, was that he had this really moonshot, ambitious goal of kind of providing this service to 1,000,000 students, and, at the time, I think we were helping maybe, like, 40 to 50 students per year. And then that's even with a team of 2 or 3, I think that's scaled to maybe 120, 100. And even then, one of the things that you learn are, like, how much can one person take on as, an admissions consultant, which is a very debatable thing within that industry. But, at a certain point in time, and I would say probably by our 3rd year, it was very clear that we needed to pivot to, some kind of tech solution, tech platform, that would either enable us or enable schools to essentially do what we're, doing if we wanted to really hit this 1,000,000 serviced, milestone. So rightfully so, the co-founders started investing in engineering teams to build a SaaS platform, definitely by my 3rd year, working there, to basically scale this product, and now this is maybe like 2014, 2015, when they started kind of making that pivot, and at the time, which is kinda crazy to think about, that's only like a decade ago, like, SaaS platforms were all the rage, especially from an investment point of view. Like, if you didn't have some kind of scalable tech solution for your service, then you probably weren't getting, like, Series A or Series B funding. Yeah.
Did you get funding?
Yeah, eventually. I think we kind of, got a lot of, angel investments, by our 4th year, certainly. But I think it was clear that there were a lot of closed doors because we didn't have a platform, um, until we did have a team of engineers. And then I think the second that we actually had and were able to propose a timeline that definitely showed the possibility of scaling with a SaaS platform, yeah, then we got a lot more, options in terms of investment.
What are some, like, early bottlenecks you guys faced
Mm.
trying to build a system?
I mean, honestly, it's number of students that you can service to consultant. And, in the admissions consulting world, there's a lot of turnover, right? Admissions consultants are kind of this very niche, kind of interesting thing where you want someone who has a degree from a top university. They have a lot of marketability and hiring power, uh, uh, that they can command. But here they are working with students, so it's a kind of a very specific type of person that you're finding. And even when you do find them, I think they either get poached by another company or they realize that they can do it independently and make a lot more money doing it independently. or they end up doing something completely different altogether, right? So there's a lot of turnover, and I think the bottleneck tends to be like, well, shoot, we can only one. Let's just I'm making this up. This is quite debatable. But one consultant can take on anywhere between 30 to 40 students in a year. And once we lose that person, we've got to kind of train someone else to do this very niche thing, right? This is not like a typical academic career for many people, right? So I think that's the biggest bottleneck. I think eventually it became clear, which I know that we'll get to, that if we were going to build a SaaS platform, it can't just be for the admissions consultants because even that's the same bottleneck, but now enabled with a tool. I think the pivot to doing B2B, which is like, how do we build a platform for high schools as opposed to just individual admissions consultant is the play. Simply because even the existence of admission consulting companies exists because we're, servicing the problem that schools, especially at the time, only have maybe 2 or 3 guidance counselors who are doing many things as a career, and being faced with 300 depends on the school, right? With the size of the senior class graduating, and they certainly cannot read every single student's essay and give critical feedback on that. So that's even like you're kind of like diluting scaled problems back until you're getting admissions consulting companies. So to answer that, you're going to want to build SaaS platforms that are um, servicing the entire ecosystem of that larger kind of problem and all the different problems that come within that ecosystem.
It's interesting because the admissions consulting was kind of created to outsource what the guidance
Mhm.
counselors couldn't, and then what you guys did was outsource it back to the guidance
Kind
counselors
of.
and just give them software tools so that they could scale on their own and you didn't have to be that outsource anymore.
I would say that's definitely true in the early iterations of the platform that was being built. I think we were definitely leaning towards building a software that was enabling admissions consultants and then also guidance counselors. So you'll definitely see that in a lot of the DNA still within that platform. But yeah, I mean the idea was that there's bigger problems than just being able to provide a organized college list, uh, giving students the ability to kind of exchange different drafts of essays with their counselor. Like there's much bigger problems, right? There's career exploration, there's actually even opening up the larger market from prestigious universities to all universities. Admissions consulting companies tend to service mostly the US and the UK, and then kind of the agency model, for those of you who don't know that, like, there's a lot of different companies that are, paid and because they're represented by other universities to basically, like, just send international students to those particular universities. And so I think that's not something that's usually being addressed as a market for admissions consultants. And so the bigger thing that I think the SaaS platform, especially today, opened up to is like, hey, it doesn't matter whether you're applying to the top school or some random school that just opened in this particular country. Like, we are looking to make it easy for high school students to learn more about what they want to do and facilitate a direct application to those universities, right? And I think that was a bigger, obstacle to overcome, and truth be told, I definitely exited the company before that kind of, that challenge was taken on. Still obviously very good friends with the founders. But yeah, like, that's I think where that platform's at now, and I think that's, like, ultimately the challenge that they're taking on to scale even larger and service even more students.
Were you there during the pivot from the B2C to B2B?
It happened very quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What are the challenges? Because that's a huge market shift and a huge marketing shift and education shift. Did you remember any, like, challenges you faced during that?
Yeah, so the challenge and this is not my specific challenge, I think this was definitely Rohan and Stanley's biggest challenge, those are the founders. Like, they were now not building a platform. So, in the early days, we had engineers that would just kind of, like, sit over my shoulder, try to figure out operationally what we were doing, because obviously my business was focusing on B2C mostly. They were kind of using the architecture of like Asana and Trello and different Kanban softwares to rebuild something that's like specifically going to enable admissions consultants. Where the pivot happened and the challenges of that pivot was when they were going to schools individually and understanding, okay, as a guidance counselor, right now we're not even talking about an admissions consultant. What are the challenges that you guys are having? And then you're getting like splits in the market, right? There's international schools that obviously were using platforms like Naviance or Maya or BridgeU that were a little bit more nuanced in terms of like, international schools, especially the wealthier ones in Southeast Asia. They're quite familiar with kind of having relationships with a lot of these universities and facilitating data management in that way. But then you have a lot of local schools, even within Singapore, that are not as savvy, right? They do not have the infrastructure. And so the challenge that the team had in terms of pivoting to B2B was understanding the different use cases for different types of high schools with different types of capabilities who are sending students to oftentimes not even the same country, right? A lot of countries will have international schools that are specific to the country. So it might like you might have like an Indian international school in Singapore that's sending shore students to the US, but also to India. So now you're kind of, okay, how do I now build a platform that is nuanced enough to understand the different application and admissions processes of like 50 plus different countries? And Cialfo does service 50 plus different countries now. So I think that's where that was just a bigger challenge that they were undertaking that honestly I can't speak to. It was yeah.
It's a huge nightmare for guidance
Yeah.
counselors to
Yeah.
deal with that scale of students with that many varieties and
Yeah.
schedules and application processes.
Yeah.
Uh, that was like a decade ago.
For sure.
The college application process was a lot of creative essays and stuff. This was all before AI.
Yeah.
AI enters the picture.
Yeah.
I know you've kind of left that market since then, but just like, what do you see in terms of like admissions or the entire job market of admissions counseling when you have these generative AIs make that can make essays or can be applied to this?
It's so interesting. It makes it more difficult to get, I think, a lot of authentic experiences from the students. And I think, I mean, this is true of any kind of technology. It's like they wanna use the quickest way to completing their assignment, period, right? That's fine, and I think a lot of students will kind of find shortcuts just as much as admissions consultants also find it easy to use as a tool. Like I can just quickly look up the stats of a particular university. I can kind of like, sure, get some preliminary feedback about what an edit might look like for a particular question. But I think, and this is what we're finding out even outside of this industry, is that the journey of ideating your essay and perfecting your essay is not just for the output of the essay. A lot of students discover their voice, even what they want to study, and certainly what interests them about a university by doing the research and actually then writing about it. I think I've seen students shortchange themselves and apply to universities that they honestly don't even know much about. I've seen also students use AI get, like, facilities and majors that actually don't exist at that university. So they're even, like, kind of putting hallucinations in their application that are definitely shooting themselves in the foot when an admissions reader is reading that. So I think there's a lot of challenges. I think there's a lot of, like, things that make the process, certainly easier to navigate, but I think the core and the crux of why any student would hire an admissions consultant is because you're wanting personal feedback on an essay. You're at the end of the day, a good admissions consultant keeps in touch with the ecosystem of any given university and other admissions officers. And so they're getting on the ground feedback about what is working and what's in trend, what some universities are looking for and what they're not, and not just kind of like what US News and World Report's reporting or whatever Reddit's talking about what universities do and don't like, right? We at the end of the day still have to kind of keep in mind that like a lot of these AI systems are kind of pulling from what people are talking about. And I'll tell you, if you read enough Reddit boards or wherever, like message boards, there's a lot of people speculating about what worked and what didn't work. Oh, so and so has this GPA and so had this CCA, and so therefore they got rejected. So you don't want to like necessarily trust all of your information from those sources. You kind of still want a nuanced person to kind of like review the applications, right? You still want several other people to actually review those applications. But I mean, I would like to think that there's still kind of a room and space for admissions consultants to kind of exist. But it definitely comes with like a different lens on how to approach the application process.
Keeping your voice
Yeah.
even with the tools you're using.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think honestly, that's like from a non-commercial standpoint, that's the best part of the entire process, right? Like I think a lot of students, especially in Asia, kind of get pulled into using services like admissions consulting because their parents want to maximize or they themselves want to optimize their chance of getting in, and that's fine. But I think what they are pleasantly surprised with, especially if the admissions consulting is doing a good job, is they enjoy the actual experience. That their preconceived notions about what makes them successful is being challenged. Can't tell you how it's such a stereotype at this point for a student to come in thinking they want to study X, Y, and Z, and maybe they do, and then they think I have to present these awards, these accomplishments, which they also have to do as well, but not knowing that framing those things in a way that isn't cookie cutter, in a way that's very genuine and authentic and more importantly unique, and true to their voice is what's required. And having a person, especially an older person, to kind of navigate those topics and explore those things that they've achieved from a point of view that isn't, I don't know, like boring and like resume like, is such a great experience for both parties. I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away from is like I've gotten to work with 500 plus different students and families. Like I've gotten to meet students who are aiming very high, families that are just trying to help their kid really just honestly submit their best work. And I think the thing that I've come away from that learning is, sure, I'm really good at editing an essay. I'm really good at scaling management teams and delivering the service in so many different countries in so many different ways. But I think at the end of the day, like you're helping a very young person and a very worried, anxious family navigate a really big chapter in someone else's life.
You've helped over 500 families. You've challenged students to find themselves. How are you challenging yourself recently?
So I'm doing something interesting. Like I it's like I never thought I'd be here, but at the same time, I'm excited that I am. I've been in the education management industry for about 15 years, about 4 or 5 different companies that I've scaled in more or less the same thing in maybe 3 or 4 different countries. Um, I Man, I've done admissions consulting in every possible way you can think to do it and found a lot of success. I've been humbled in many ways in a lot of those experiences, but it's not what I grew up wanting to do. It's so funny. Like, I have helped young people navigate and figure out what they want to do as a career, pursue that passion, showcase things in their portfolio that they didn't think were important that actually does make them a stronger candidate. But I've never done that for myself. Like when I was growing up, I definitely went to a competitive high school where I had to like present a bunch of different CCAs and achievements, but it was for the sake of just getting into a good school without any kind of nuanced thought. Like I wish I had an admissions consultant. I wish I had someone who challenged me in those ways. Um, and now I do. Now I'm doing that for myself. So now I'm pursuing a career as an artist. And I think as someone who's been C suite for such a long time, I didn't know that I had that in me. I think it's something that I've always been kind of like I've always been interested in tech. I've always been interested in animation and art and storytelling. I think I've been doing that since I was like a teenager, even if before, right? Like big like storytelling, animation, Pixar, Marvel person, like that's my wheelhouse. Um Always been a writer in secret. But yeah, about a year and a half ago, I left my career. Uh, it was definitely time. I've
It's a good
I
time to exit.
It's a good time at Tags, and I think, and this is what I would hope is inspiring for your viewers is that like there's so much accessibility in being able to pivot either as a company or as a person. I mean, AI is like really enabling us to kind of like scale up an idea that you had. Like, it's so like, for me personally, I was very insecure about the fact that I never went to an animation school. I am not a 3D modeler. I don't really know how to storyboard. I've never been trained in any kind of these technical, ways. So that always kind of, like, left me to pursue more corporate things. I think my soul is very operational, which I'm finding out even as an artist, and I'm only, like, in my first year of, like, focused artistry. But yeah, like, I am challenging myself to, spend the next 10 to 20 years pursuing something that, like, truly is my passion, right? I loved what I did it very successfully, but I there was no more ladder to climb. I'm now being very humbled by the idea of, like, what is an artist? What is an artist in today's ecosystem? And who am I as an artist? Who am I as a writer? Who am I as, like, I'm developing an IP, which we'll talk about. But I've never uh identified as that publicly, and there's so much um uh there's so much fear and vulnerability in redefining yourself kind of halfway through your career in something that's, like, completely different than what you were doing before. So yeah.
Was there anything that gave you the green light to go ahead with this, or anything that was holding you back previously?
I think there's a lot of imposter syndrome. You know, especially when you work in higher education, you just see all these talented kids, like, really talented kids get really, like, talented degrees, and you're just watching, like, dude, the amount of, like, I don't know how you're running a business, you have an art portfolio, you're running an NGO, and you're, like, only 18, and you're, like, getting into MIT. I think that, like, when you live in that world, you really, for better or for worse, kind of, like, you're seeing, like, the most talented people pursue the most difficult credentials. And so I think you can kind of be wrapped up in the idea of needing those credentials yourself. So that was kind of, like, I think maybe subconsciously a limiting factor for me. But I think when at a certain point in time, like, you find yourself pursuing artistic projects in secret. So I think I was writing poetry by myself for the first time. I'd never in my entire life thought I'd be writing poetry. I found that when I was in really difficult situations, sir, personally or even professionally, I would have these different outlets. Like, loved interior design, didn't realize that, like, uh I shouldn't be disclosing this, but, like, when I would play hooky from work, I would be, like, shopping, like, for furniture. I would, like, not even shopping, I'd be, like, walking through, like, interior design malls and factories and, like textile, like, stores. And I think there were one too many things like that that I would catch myself doing on my off time that I was like, "I think something's calling you to do something else." And so, yeah, like, when I was ready, I took on a few different projects. I think I spent my first year discovering, myself as an artist. Like, I'm doing all these small projects in secret. Which one? Like, what does this all mean? Like, what is our end goal? And that's a journey. I think that you kinda have to let that breathe a little bit. Um, uh, me as, like, a C-suite person very much wanted, like, what's the ROI? What's the KPI? Like, what is our job description? Like, how are we marketing this? How are we, like, I think you kinda have to, like, take a break from thinking in that way, to really let your mind kind of, like, I don't know, like, unpeel from this industrialist mindset.
And you went back to school.
Yeah, I did. I took night courses, studying interior design at the time. Um, yeah, that was cool. Like, I actually got the opportunity to, uh, redesign and develop, a top floor apartment that's 150 square meters from scratch, right? I know nothing about carpentry. I know nothing about, like, interior design. But I did that. I was curious about that. Like, I found myself kind of, like, interested in that. So I studied a little bit of, like, feng shui, Like feng shui has this thing that they call a bagua map. Bagua map is like a grid that you put over the blueprint of your house. Kind of gives you this idea of like you should put the color red here. It means fame and different kind of principles. Um, and for me personally, as an artist, I'm a bit like of an operations person. I think in frameworks and systems, and I just found comfort in approaching art in the same way, like a very paint by numbers kind of way. So I kind of like found this feng shui bagua map and was like, okay, great. I've never done an apartment before. I got this huge space that I get to like renovate. Spent about 2 years doing that. Um, Let me just kind of like sketch designs. Let me like find pieces that I think work here um and this is my apartment that I'm speaking about. Like, I very much had the vision of I want this to feel safe and comfortable, and I want to be able to lounge in it. You've been to my apartment. It's very hard to describe. It's a mix between like tropical jungle meets retro futurism. I don't
It's a
know.
big art piece.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm unfortunate for the opportunity to do it. And then funny enough, I did take course, which was about 6 months, while I was actually working at another place, um, to learn interior design after I had finished the apartment. So it was kind of like I did everything for 2 years and then it was like, "Wait, I should actually learn how I should have done things." But that was cool. Like, I think a part of me still wanted, like, I don't know, a cert just to be like even though I finished the thing that I set out to do, I still need to, like, justify this, which is a silly thing, I guess. Yeah.
Tell me about the project you're currently working on and how you took that operational mindset that you talked about with this.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. I like pursued interior design, took that course and was like, I love it. It's interesting. Probably don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And so I think what's important is that you have to try things. You have to put in the time to kind of just learn something. And so after that, or while that was happening, I was discovering myself as a writer. Something I told myself, dude, for most of my life that I wasn't. Like I just it didn't appeal to me. I didn't think I didn't enjoy writing. Like I barely enjoyed editing essays back when I had to do that. Um, yeah, it just wasn't for me. And then yet I found myself being inspired to do it. I think generative AI really made a big impression on me. Um, Even the fact that like people write it off as like AI slop kind of made it punk for me. I was like, you guys don't get it. Like people like me who've always wanted to do something, who've always had like a very big imagination, like now we get to do it. Like even if it's imperfect, like now I can ideate things that I've been holding on to. So, um I very much had always known even when you and I were working together that I was going to develop an IP that was representative of my imagination in the world that I want to build. I have heroes like Miyazaki, George Lucas, um, Stan Lee. Like I really wanted to have my own studio. I wanted to do my own animation. I have all these stories that I need to tell. When I think about like what my superpower is, it's like certainly character writing and development and like being such a visionary when it comes to exactly what something needs to look like. Like it's not something that I have to like think about. It's like I know exactly what that room's supposed to look like. I know exactly what that character looks like. I know exactly how these people behave. But again, I still found myself maybe it's a bit of a crux, like a crutch rather. Like I needed a system. I found MBTI, which is like a personality Myers-Briggs type of like 16 personalities. I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with that. Framework for psychology. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna like write characters that are these types of personalities that are as a framework, even though I fully know that like aesthetically, this is what I'm channeling for each of these different characters. Um, this is how like I know I want the narrative to go. So I just slowly started writing about them, using generative AI to illustrate them. And yeah, like that's what I've been doing for the past year. I'm at the point now where and this is I think what every artist goes through is like publishing your work. So, yeah.
That's the scariest part.
That's the scariest part. I think I had anything that I'm releasing now, 2026, are things that I've worked on a year ago, and what's kind of, I guess, silly is that, like, dude, these things are moving so quickly in terms of, like, their aesthetic and fidelity, that when I say things, I mean, like, generative AI models, that, like, I'm almost embarrassed to put out what I've been working on a year ago because 'cause I'm like, "Dude, it looks so much better now if I was using these tools," but you gotta get over it. Like, you gotta just, like, say, "This is what I got. This is what I got," and kind of go with the flow. Yeah.
So what is the project specifically? Like, what are you designing and how does AI play into it?
Sure. Well, so I think that my goal is to be a creative director of a animation studio. I have dreams of being the next, honestly, like I don't want to be on my Kanye, but like the next Disney, right? Like I really want to create worlds. And I also have such a strong belief that there will be a merger of both live events and animation. I'm not saying going to the movies is completely dead, but I do think that there is a combination of concert and narrative IP that we will see in our future. By that I mean, there's a lot of DJs that are doing a lot of like big kind of like visuals, but they're kind of abstract. They kind of complement what the sound is and whatever their set is, and that's very cool. And I like personally work with some local DJs to kind of help them do different visuals in that right as well. But I do think that it will be a thing, or at least I would like to make it a thing, where here's this serialized drama or animation that I've been following online, I've been following on YouTube, whatever it may be. But I actually want to go to an event where I get to meet other people who are doing the same, who are interested in the same series. And here we are in this concert being unveiled the next Avengers, whatever, right? So I see myself as developing IP, because that's just what personally interests me, but also plugging into a platform that I would like to be a pioneer of and or join that ecosystem because I do think that those two things will merge in time. We're not just going to continue to sit home and like sit on our phones or sit in front of our TVs and consume the next serial drama. I think it will be an active participation in person.
Okay, so what is 42 and Fairy?
Okay, so 42 and Fairy is the story about 17 different characters. It's kind of like a mix of like Lost meets X-Men meets I don't know. Um, it's kind of just like this thing that I've been writing for a long time. It has a different cast of characters. They kind of get in touch with another reality that holds a completely different version of themselves. So every of the 17 characters has another version. I'm very inspired by the show Lost. So a lot of the story takes place on an island that's very mysterious. Um, from a business standpoint, for me, it's um a trilogy that I'll be writing, and then a series of short novellas for each character that I'm developing as well. Um, it's so that's kind of like the short answer. The deeper existential answer is that it's really me exploring different sides of my personality, different things that um I've kind of dealt with in my personal life. Some of the characters visually are inspired by people I know. Some of the characters are spiritually inspired by people that I know. Yeah, it's just kind of like my first pursuit as a writer and developer. To see if I can kind of develop as a world, an ecosystem. For me, I'm using it currently. Um, sure, as like it's cathartic. I like it. That's my thing, but also this is my portfolio that I'm developing to say like, "Hey, you can now leverage AI to build your own IP." Right? You do not need to have a certificate to do this. You do not need to hire or like work for a studio or work at a studio to hire talented artists to do this or that. Like you can actually attempt to do it you're on your own. Yeah.
What are the tools you're using?
Okay, so the tools that I'm using to illustrate specifically, I'm using Comfy UI. Comfy UI is kind of like a LoRa. It's a I forget what LoRa stands for, but essentially it's a layer of AI that sits on generative AI platforms like Sora. or Grok Imagine or Seed Dance. There's all these different ones, right? And you kind of can use these different generative AI models to train a particular style or get a consistent character that you like. So this is kind of where I'm headed now is like, how do I train an AI model to kind of like um, streamline what I'm trying to make, right? I wasn't always there when I started, and even kind of now, like, I didn't take a course. There's no real, like, university to learn AI. I just started learning Midjourney. Um, there's, like, these kind of aggregate companies like AI that kind of have all these different generative models that are kind of baked in it. And for me, I started just, like, individually creating each of my characters using mostly Midjourney at the time. This is like now like a year plus ago. Um and that was from Pinterest boards that I had for each of the characters even years prior to that. So it's like Pinterest to Midjourney to whatever editing software, Photoshop, Illustrator, right? To a character. And then more recently I started like taking those. Honestly, they're very, like, amateur designs for characters and learning how to use different, generative AI models to animate them. So it's been a journey to kind of figure out, like, "Oh, this particular, um, model is really good at animating characters that you want to, like, remain still while it's just kind of like a slow zoom, whereas other models are like, "We don't know how to make a character be still. We need to have them in motion." So you kind of, like, learn, like, what these models are trained on and which one to use for what scenario. And then, yeah, like, I've been kind of exploring, those things. I've been trying to more recently learn the art of perspective and storyboarding. So I know a lot of what happens in the fiction, but it's like, how do you visualize that in a way that tells a story? From what angle should a camera be? Um, what are the things that you wanna focus on in a particular narrative? But yeah, like, I'm using AI to kind of, like, explore all of those kind of different dimensions of illustration.
As someone that has specific visions of things,
Yeah.
how is it working with software that spits out its own ideas that you have to kind of corral? You can't make direct edits necessarily.
It's so much patience.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a lot of tweaking. It's it's funny, like, uh it's also I was reading this, like, book that I highly recommend called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. There's a lot of different things that he talks about in that book, but one of the things that really kind of stood out to me was the fact that, like, when you're using any kind of tool, not even AI, there's a part of the art that wants to inform what it looks like, right? So if you're, like, designing a house, all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, no, they're like, this wall is not a wall that we can, like, turn like, we can, take down," or, this has to have an air conditioning pipe that goes through it." So there's a bit of feedback that you get with, like, the thing that you're working on, and AI is no different. And sometimes it's great. There have been times where, like, I have a particular vision for what this looks like, but this generative model will not help me execute it exactly how I want it to be. But whoa, they've they've added a new element. They've given a character a smirk that I didn't anticipate. I think even one of my characters winks in one of my animations, and I was like, I didn't tell it to do that. And the fact that it did it completely didn't reshape, but completely added an element to that character's story that I'm like, I love that. So I think there's a lot of learning, but you gotta have to be also be open that, like, it's going to speak back to you in ways that you didn't expect, and that's sometimes not a point of frustration, but a point of inspiration.
I want to talk briefly. You mentioned like the AI slop pushback some people have. I think it's less in Asia, first of all.
Sure. Yeah.
I think Asia has a very different view of it.
Absolutely.
And then, when you're speaking of it too, you kept bringing up like the human element and doing live events and stuff.
Yeah.
So talk about kind of where you see generative AI and the human aspect and kind of where this is converging.
Yeah. I think AI slop, even as a term, is such a great, like, cultural representative of we're scared and we don't know what this is, and we're, not liking what we're seeing, in the immediate kind of beta version of a greater technology. I do agree with you. In Asia, it definitely is not as stigmatized. I think what you'll see slowly is these things refine themselves in a way that introduces so many different types of styles and enables so many different types of creators that yes, the ecosystem of the type of art that you can consume will be bigger. Some of it you won't like, but in its diversification, you'll definitely find artists that are either pursuing a particular look or a particular application of a look that really resonates with you. For me growing up, like, you're kind of forced to like certain styles, right? Like, I personally love, like, an '80s, '90s, like, anime aesthetic. I think that's really cool. But there's only so many different styles that we're kind of introduced to, and now you're just seeing, like, games and animations that are like, "Well, I didn't even know that was possible." And I think that's opening this door of, like, I didn't even know that I liked this style because I had never seen it before. It reminds me of this particular thing. I hate to use this as an example, like, there are people who are taking textures that are so you wouldn't even have, like, thought of could be its own style of, like, everything. Like, this is a foam kind of, like, soundproof being kind of, like, texture that we're kind of all familiar with, but, like, imagine an entire series that's just that aesthetic. And so I think we're kind of seeing this, like, renaissance explosion of, like, here's what can be. And that's exciting to me. Like, I think that's going to find different applications for different types of mediums, and I personally am really inspired by the soundtrack and scores and sound of different films and even animations, and I mean, I'm not familiar with, like, the explosion of what's happening sonically with AI, but I think that there's going to be a lot of, matchmaking between these worlds, that's going to drive a lot of innovation in terms of experience, right? Like, look, we all love, a lot of these top DJs, but, like, a lot of us are going to these, concerts and these events because, like, you wanna see the giant robot, you wanna see the dome, you wanna see whatever that they've been curating for this experience, but I think that's just gonna explode even more, uh in a more diversified way, even at a smaller scale. Locally, you're even seeing a lot of these like super clubs kind of recreate these immersive experiences where all the walls are LEDs and you're kind of like being brought into this world. Like, a very exciting time to be an artist and to kind of even like create content for those type of mediums. So yeah,
I think that's a really interesting point. There's this Steve Jobs quote about how a lot of times when new technology is introduced, you just try to imitate the older technology first before you discover the uses of it. Like when they have the compact disc, they were just using it for music records.
yeah,
And it took a while for them to figure out, like, oh, it's like random access memory. Like we can
yeah,
actually make games from this. And there's like a whole other dimension
mhm,
that took a while to catch on. It's not just a replacement for vinyl, it's a whole other thing.
yeah.
And I think we might be at that phase a bit.
For sure. I mean, I think people are finding ways to commercialize all these different applications. Like, I know locally what's becoming really popular is kind of creating these like I don't know how to call it, like iconic cartoon characters. Like they kind of like a representative of like, I don't know, like Mickey Mouse, I guess, but and then creating sculptures and a lot of that movement is happening because of 3D printing, right? And so now people are kind of creating these like brands and IPs of like, here's a cute little bunny that I made. Here's a cute little like keychain. Here's a cute uh like artistic sculpture that's like massive. Like Bangkok is littered with like these huge art installations that are like cute. Even like Gentle Woman or Gentle Monster does this like big, like their whole thing is like, how do we take creativity and like put it at scale? Which was not necessarily a branding or commercial kind of like way to approach retail, but now it is. And so yeah, like there's so many different avenues of communities and people doing different things in different ways.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at 42 and Fairy. My artist name is Vulps, VULPS. So you can find me on Instagram there as well. I do have a Patreon, which is also 42 and Fairy. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's about
Perfect.
it.
Those links will be in the description. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the two things that I think you should take away from all this is that like you're never too old to kind of like pivot in your career. I think whether you're a business or a person, like, the technologies out now are enabling you to kind of change lanes, change avenues, never too late to redefine yourself. And I think that everyone should find their creative outlet. I think it'll be more and more important to invest in that, as time goes on.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.